The desert heat shimmered across the tarmac as Corporal Kira Voss stepped off the transport vehicle, her boots hitting the ground with a soft thud that was immediately swallowed by the vast expanse of the Naval Special Warfare Training Facility. She was shorter than most of the others filing out behind her, her frame lean but unremarkable, her brown hair pulled back in a regulation bun that did nothing to distinguish her from 1,000 other service members. The sun bore down mercilessly, and she adjusted the strap of her duffel bag, her movements economical and unhurried. Captain Nathaniel Bridger stood 30 yards away, arms crossed over his chest, his weathered face carved from years of combat deployments and harder decisions. He watched the new arrivals with the practiced eye of someone who had seen every type of soldier imaginable. His gaze lingered on Voss for only a moment before moving on, a slight furrow appearing between his brows. She looked young, uncertain even, and he wondered not for the first time why command had insisted on her placement in this particular training cycle. The formation assembled quickly, boots snapping together as voices barked orders across the compound. Voss found her position in the third row, standing at attention while the morning brief began. Around her, she could feel the sideways glances, the quick assessments being made by her fellow trainees. Sergeant Trent Holbrook stood 2 rows ahead, his shoulders broad and his posture radiating the kind of confidence that came from proven performance. He glanced back once, his eyes sliding over her with barely concealed dismissal before he turned his attention back to the front. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've witnessed similar acts of courage where you're from. The first day blurred into a rhythm of instructions, facility orientations, and the endless paperwork that accompanied any military transfer. Voss moved through it all with quiet efficiency, speaking only when spoken to, her answers precise and unremarkable. During the afternoon equipment issue, she found herself in the armory, surrounded by racks of weapons that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Standard M4 carbines, M9 pistols, and there in the far corner behind reinforced glass, the long rifles. Barrett M82 A1S, their massive frames designed for one purpose, reaching out across impossible distances. She paused there, longer than necessary, her eyes tracing the lines of the rifle with something that might have been recognition. Her fingers twitched slightly at her side before she caught herself, aware that Chief Warrant Officer Helena Strand was watching from behind the issue desk. Voss moved on, accepting her assigned M4 with a nod of thanks, but something in that moment had registered. A flicker of familiarity that didn't match the uncertain recruit image she presented. Evening found the new training class in the mess hall, trays loaded with portions designed to fuel the grueling days ahead. Voss sat alone at the end of a long table, methodically working through her meal while conversations swirled around her. Holbrook held court 3 tables over, his voice carrying as he regaled a growing audience with stories from his previous deployment. Private First Class Diego Reyes watched him with the kind of admiration reserved for proven warriors, nodding along with every word. "She belongs in an admin office. Not here," someone muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Laughter rippled through the nearby tables. Voss didn't look up, didn't react, simply continued eating with the same steady pace she had maintained since arriving. But her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, a small tell that vanished as quickly as it appeared. Captain Bridger entered the mess hall, his presence immediately commanding attention without him having to say a word. He moved through the space with purpose, his eyes cataloging everything, missing nothing. When his gaze fell on Voss, sitting alone in her self-imposed isolation, he paused. There was something there, something in the way she held herself despite the obvious social exclusion, that pricked at his instincts. He had learned long ago to trust those instincts, even when logic suggested otherwise. The first week of training began before dawn, when darkness still clung to the desert horizon and the air carried a deceptive chill that would burn away within the hour. Voss stood in formation with the others, her breathing steady as Lieutenant Commander Adrian Kensington paced before them, outlining the week's expectations in clipped, efficient sentences. physical conditioning, weapons familiarization, tactical movement drills. The basics that separated those who belonged from those who would wash out. The obstacle course stretched across 200 yards of unforgiving terrain, a serpentine challenge of walls, ropes, mud pits, and razor wire that had broken stronger candidates than most standing in formation. Holbrook cleared it in just under 4 minutes, landing at the finish with barely elevated breathing, accepting the congratulations of his growing circle with practiced humility. When Voss's turn came, she approached the starting line with the same unremarkable determination she brought to everything else. She made it over the first wall, her arms straining with the effort. The rope climb proved harder, her grip slipping twice before she found purchase and hauled herself upward with gritted teeth. By the time she hit the mud crawl, she was already behind pace, her uniform caked with dirt and sweat, her face set in concentration. She finished in 6 minutes and 40 seconds, nearly 3 minutes slower than Holbrook, and the silence that greeted her completion spoke louder than any jeers could have. Master Chief Gunner's mate Raymond Takashi watched from his position near the finish line, his weathered face impassive. He had seen thousands of recruits cycle through these courses, had learned to read potential in ways that transcended raw performance. Something about Voss's struggle interested him, the way she refused to quit despite obvious physical disadvantage, the way her eyes never showed defeat even when her body faltered. The afternoon brought weapons familiarization in the indoor range, a concrete structure that smelled of gun oil and brass casings. Captain Bridger stood at the back, observing as Kensington walked the recruits through proper handling, maintenance, and firing positions. Voss handled the M4 with competent efficiency, her movements correct if unremarkable. She field-stripped the weapon in the required time, reassembled it without error, and when her turn came to fire, she placed her shots in a respectable grouping at 25 yards. "Not bad," Corporal Kensington said, his tone professional but lacking enthusiasm. "Keep working on your stance." Voss nodded, accepting the feedback without comment. But as she cleared the weapon and stepped back from the firing line, Bridger noticed something. The way her hands had moved during the breakdown, the unconscious efficiency of someone who had done this thousands of times. It didn't match the uncertain obstacle course performance, didn't fit the quiet recruit image. The contradiction nagged at him. Evening mess hall had become a social proving ground, alliances forming and hierarchies establishing themselves with the natural brutality of military culture. Holbrook commanded the largest table, his charisma drawing others into his orbit. Private Marcus Hightower and Lance Corporal Sienna Blackwood flanked him, their laughter punctuating his stories. Reyes still watched with admiration, though something in his expression suggested the beginning of doubt. Voss sat alone again, this time with a notebook open beside her tray. She ate with one hand while the other moved across the page, writing in compact, precise script. From his position near the serving line, Bridger could see diagrams, calculations, notes that looked more advanced than basic training required. When she noticed his attention, she closed the notebook smoothly, her expression neutral. "Studying already, Corporal?" Bridger asked, moving closer. "Just reviewing, sir," she replied, her voice quiet but steady. "Making sure I understand the fundamentals." He nodded slowly, his eyes searching her face for something he couldn't quite name. "The fundamentals," he repeated, as if testing the word. "You handle a rifle like you've done more than fundamentals." For just a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by that same unremarkable composure. "I had good instructors, sir," she said simply. Holbrook's voice carried across the mess hall, loud enough to be clearly heard. "Some people just aren't cut out for this kind of work," he was saying, his tone reasonable but pointed. "No shame in it. Admin needs good people, too." The table around him erupted in agreement, heads nodding as if he had spoken profound wisdom. Voss didn't turn, didn't react, but her jaw tightened again with that same subtle tension. Bridger saw it, cataloged it, and wondered what exactly was simmering beneath that quiet surface. He had commanded enough warriors to recognize when someone was holding something back, and every instinct he possessed was now firing warning signals that he was missing something crucial about Corporal Kira Voss. The second week brought intensified physical training that separated the merely capable from those who possessed the endurance required for special operations. 5-mile runs in full gear became the morning standard, followed by calisthenics that left even the strongest candidates trembling. Voss struggled through every session, her smaller frame working twice as hard to keep pace with men who outweighed her by 50 pounds or more. She finished the runs, always, but never near the front of the pack. Her push-ups were clean, but numbered fewer than Holbrook's effortless sets. Her pull-ups maxed out at 12 when others were hitting 20. Yet she never quit, never fell out of formation, never asked for accommodation or mercy. Takashi noticed this, marking it in his silent assessments as he watched from the sidelines. Bridger noticed it too, his curiosity about this peculiar recruit deepening into something closer to fascination. Holbrook's group had expanded to include nearly half the training class, his natural leadership drawing others into his sphere. He wasn't cruel in his mockery of Voss, which somehow made it worse. His comments were delivered with a smile, wrapped in concern that sounded almost genuine. "I just worry about her in a real situation," he said during one afternoon break, loud enough to carry. "When lives are on the line, you need people you can count on." Blackwood nodded agreement, her own doubts about Voss reinforced by the daily physical struggles they all witnessed. Reyes remained silent, but his earlier admiration for Holbrook had cooled into something more thoughtful. He watched Voss during the obstacle course runs, saw how she attacked each challenge with methodical determination, never wasting energy on emotion or complaint. The shooting range became a twice-weekly ritual. It was here that the contradictions in Voss's performance became most apparent. With standard rifles at standard distances, she was competent, solid, unremarkable. Her shot groups were consistent, her handling safe and proper, her scores hovering in the middle of the class rankings. Nothing that would raise eyebrows or generate praise. Kensington marked her scores with the same neutral efficiency he applied to everyone, finding nothing worth commenting on either way. But Takashi, who had spent 30 years around weapons and the people who wielded them, saw something others missed. He noticed how Voss's eyes tracked the range, how she assessed wind indicators and heat shimmer with unconscious habit. He saw the way her breathing pattern changed before firing, a rhythm that spoke of deep training. Most tellingly, he observed that her shot groups, while unremarkable, were almost identical every time. The same level of performance, session after session, with a consistency that suggested control rather than limitation. One evening, after the others had returned their weapons and departed, Voss remained at the cleaning station. She worked slowly, methodically, breaking down her M4 with practiced hands. Takashi approached, his footsteps deliberate on the concrete floor. "You shoot like someone trying not to stand out," he said without preamble. Voss looked up, her expression carefully neutral. "I'm just following the fundamentals, Master Chief," she replied. Takashi grunted, unconvinced. He had taught fundamentals to thousands of sailors and Marines. He knew the difference between learning and disguising. Fundamentals don't explain why your breathing cycle is textbook perfect for long-range work when you're shooting at 25 yards, he said. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Then she returned to cleaning the rifle, her movements steady. "Maybe I had a good instructor," she offered. "Maybe," Takashi agreed, though his tone suggested he believed otherwise. He watched her work for another moment, then added, "Whatever you're hiding, Corporal, eventually it's going to come out. Usually does." Voss didn't respond, simply continued her work until the rifle gleamed. She reassembled it with the same careful precision, checked the action, and returned it to the armory. Takashi watched her go, then pulled out his tablet and made a note in her file. Not a criticism, not praise, just an observation that something about Corporal Kira Voss didn't add up. That night, Voss sat alone in her barracks room, a small single she had been assigned due to her rank. Spread across her desk were books that had nothing to do with basic training. Advanced ballistics, wind reading at extreme distances, atmospheric effects on projectile trajectory. She studied them with the intensity of someone preparing for something far beyond the current training curriculum, her pen moving across a separate notebook where calculations accumulated in neat columns. Outside her window, the desert stars blazed in absolute clarity, the kind of visibility that made long-distance shooting possible. The kind of conditions she knew intimately, though no one here suspected why. The third week introduced team-based exercises designed to forge unit cohesion under stress. Four-person fire teams would rotate through urban combat scenarios, communication drills, and tactical movement exercises that required coordination and trust. The team assignments were posted on Monday morning, and Voss found herself paired with three others she barely knew. Holbrook, predictably, led a team that included Blackwood, Hightower, and another experienced operator named Chun. The division felt deliberate. During the first exercise, Voss's team struggled. Communication broke down in the mock building clearance. Timing fell apart, and what should have been a coordinated movement devolved into confused hesitation. When Kensington called the drill, his critique was sharp and specific, though his eyes lingered on Voss as if wondering whether she was the weak link. Her teammates exchanged glances that confirmed what they were thinking. Holbrook's team, by contrast, moved through the same scenario with practiced efficiency. They cleared rooms with precision, their calls crisp and their movements synchronized. When they finished, Kensington actually nodded approval, a rare gesture that sent a ripple of satisfaction through the group. Holbrook accepted the praise with appropriate humility, but his eyes found Voss across the training area, and the comparison hung in the air unspoken. By Wednesday, the rumors had solidified into accepted wisdom. People were talking openly now about how Voss had been assigned to the course, speculation ranging from political correctness initiatives to family connections in command. Nobody said it with malice, which somehow made it worse. They spoke about her with the kind of pitying certainty reserved for those who simply didn't belong. She heard it all, of course, in the chow line, during breaks, in the moments before formations when voices carried across the compound. Rez, standing near her during one afternoon break, shifted uncomfortably. "They don't know you," he said quietly, the first words anyone had spoken directly to her in days that wasn't mission-related. Voss turned to look at him, her expression unreadable. "No," she agreed simply. "They don't." The second shooting range session of the week brought increased distances. 50 yards instead of 25, with wind conditions that required adjustment. Holbrook went first, placing his shots in a tight group that drew approving nods from the range officers. Blackwood followed with nearly equal performance. When Voss's turn came, she approached the line with the same quiet focus she always showed. Her first shot landed center mass. So did the second, and the third. She completed her string with methodical precision, her breathing controlled, her movements economical. When the target was retrieved, her grouping was slightly larger than Holbrook's, but perfectly adequate. Kensington marked her score without comment. Adequate, acceptable, unremarkable. But Bridger, watching from his usual position at the back of the range, saw something else. He saw how she had barely glanced at the wind flags, how her adjustments had been made almost instinctively, how her body position had shifted to account for the breeze without apparent thought. It was the kind of unconscious adaptation that came from thousands of hours of practice, not the careful application of recently learned principles. He made a decision then, one that he would later question. After the range session concluded, he approached Kensington with instructions to increase the difficulty of Voss's next evaluation. "Push her harder," he said. "I want to see where her limits actually are." Kensington raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "You think there's something there, sir?" he asked. Bridger considered the question, his eyes following Voss as she cleaned her weapon with that same methodical care. "I think we're not seeing the complete picture," he said finally. "And I don't like incomplete pictures." That evening, Holbrook held court in the common area, his audience larger than ever. The conversation had turned to deployment stories, close calls, and heroic actions that separated theoretical soldiers from proven warriors. Voss passed through on her way to her quarters, her notebook tucked under her arm, and Holbrook's voice followed her. "Some people are great in training," he said, his tone conversational. "But when the bullets are real and the stakes are life and death, that's when you find out who you really are. That's when training either holds up or it doesn't." The group nodded agreement, several glancing toward Voss's retreating back. She didn't turn, didn't acknowledge the words, simply continued to her room and closed the door behind her. Inside, she set down her notebook and stood at the window, looking out at the darkening desert. Her hands were steady, her breathing calm, but in her eyes was something that hadn't been there before. Not anger, not hurt, something colder and more controlled. The look of someone who had heard enough and was simply waiting for the right moment to respond. The announcement came during Thursday morning formation, when the desert sun had already begun its relentless assault and the assembled trainees stood at attention in crisp lines. Kensington held a clipboard, his voice carrying across the compound with military precision. "Advanced weapons qualification begins next week," he announced. "This will include familiarization and certification on specialized systems, including the M240, the Mark 19, and for qualified candidates, the Barrett M82A1 long-range rifle system." A murmur rippled through the formation. The Barrett was legendary, a weapon that separated marksmen from true precision shooters. Few ever qualified on it, and fewer still ever fired it in combat conditions. Holbrook's posture straightened slightly, his interest clearly piqued. This was the kind of qualification that built reputations. Captain Bridger stepped forward, his weathered face impassive as he surveyed the formation. "The long-range qualification will be voluntary," he said. "It requires additional range time, intensive study, and demonstrated aptitude with standard systems first. Those interested should submit their names to Master Chief Takashi by 1700 hours today." The formation was dismissed, and immediately clusters formed as trainees discussed the opportunity. Holbrook was already planning, his confidence evident in every gesture. "I've been waiting for this," he told his growing audience. "This is where real operators separate themselves." Blackwood agreed, her own excitement barely contained. The Barrett qualification was prestigious, something that would follow them through their entire careers. Hightower was already calculating what it would take to qualify, mentally reviewing his marksmanship scores. The conversation swirled with ambition and anticipation. Voss stood apart from the clusters, her expression neutral as she processed the announcement. She remained still for a long moment, then turned and walked toward the building where Takashi maintained his office. Her stride was purposeful, her decision apparently made. She found him at his desk, reviewing training scores on a tablet. He looked up as she appeared in the doorway, unsurprised to see her there. "Corporal Voss," he said. "Let me guess. I'd like to submit my name for the long-range qualification, sir," she said quietly. Takashi studied her for a moment, his experienced eyes searching her face. "You understand this isn't like the standard rifle work," he said. "The Barrett is a different animal entirely. Requires strength, precision, and understanding of ballistics most people never develop." "I understand, Master Chief," she replied. He made a note on his tablet, then looked back at her. "Your scores so far have been adequate, but not exceptional," he observed. "What makes you think you're ready for this level?" Voss met his gaze steadily. "I'd like the opportunity to find out, sir," she said simply. Before Takashi could respond, voices echoed in the hallway outside. Holbrook appeared in the doorway, Blackwood and Hightower flanking him. He stopped short when he saw Voss, surprise flickering across his face before it settled into something between amusement and disbelief. "Corporal Voss," he said, his tone friendly but with an edge underneath. "Didn't expect to see you here." "I'm submitting for the long-range qualification," she replied evenly. The silence that followed was heavy. Holbrook exchanged glances with his companions, and something unspoken passed between them. "That's ambitious," he said finally. "The Barrett isn't really a beginner's weapon." "I'm aware, Sergeant," Voss said. Holbrook stepped closer, his superior height creating a physical imbalance that was impossible to ignore. "Look," he said, and now his tone shifted to something that might have been concern. I'm just trying to help here. This qualification is serious. People can get hurt if they're not ready for it. The recoil alone can cause real damage if you don't know what you're doing. I appreciate your concern, Voss replied, her voice calm. But I'd still like to submit my name. Blackwood spoke up from behind Holbrook. Maybe you should work your way up to it, she suggested. Master the fundamentals first, then move to the advanced systems. The fundamentals are important, Voss agreed. But I'd like to attempt the qualification. Holbrook shook his head slowly, his expression settling into something between pity and frustration. Your funeral, he said. Just don't expect the rest of us to slow down when you can't keep up. He submitted his name to Takashi, his confidence radiating as he did so. Blackwood and Hightower followed suit. They left together, their voices carrying back down the hallway in animated discussion about preparation strategies and expected challenges. Takashi waited until they were gone, then turned back to Voss. You know what you just signed up for, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Master Chief, she replied. He studied her for another moment, then nodded slowly. Your name's on the list, he said. Qualification range is scheduled for Monday at 0600. I suggest you spend the weekend reviewing ballistics tables and atmospheric effects on long-range shooting. I will, sir, she said, and something in her tone made Takashi look at her more closely. But she was already turning to leave, her expression as neutral and unremarkable as ever, giving nothing away. The weekend descended on the training facility with unusual weight, as if the air itself understood that something significant was approaching. While most trainees took advantage of the reduced schedule to rest and recover, those who had volunteered for the Barrett qualification found themselves consumed with preparation. Holbrook organized study sessions in the common area, spreading out ballistics charts and atmospheric tables while his growing following absorbed every word. He spoke with the confidence of someone who had already visualized success, describing sight pictures and breathing techniques with practiced authority. Voss spent her weekend alone, as always. She checked out reference materials from the training library, thick manuals filled with technical specifications, and firing tables that most people found impenetrably dense. In her quarters, she worked through calculations with methodical precision, filling pages of her notebook with numbers and diagrams that spoke of understanding far beyond what the manuals taught. But if anyone had looked closely, they would have noticed something strange. She wasn't learning these concepts. She was reviewing them, the way someone might refresh their memory of a language they already spoke fluently. Saturday evening found the mess hall buzzing with conversation about Monday's qualification. Bets were being made, not on whether Holbrook would qualify, but by what margin he would lead the others. Blackwood was given good odds for second place, her marksmanship scores having been consistently strong throughout training. Hightower was considered a solid third. The other volunteers were discussed in terms of their chances of even completing the course. Nobody was betting on Voss. When her name came up at all, it was with uncomfortable silence or quickly changed subjects, the kind of avoidance that came from not wanting to witness an inevitable failure. Reyes, sitting at the edge of one of these conversations, felt something stir inside him that might have been doubt about the consensus. He had watched her more carefully than the others, had seen the subtle signs of competence they all dismissed. But even he couldn't reconcile her physical struggles with the demands of the Barrett system. Sunday morning brought Bridger to the range for a personal inspection. He walked the firing lines, examined the prepared Barrett rifles, and consulted with Takashi about the qualification standards. The conversation was professional and efficient, but underneath it ran a current of anticipation that neither man acknowledged directly. What do you think her play is? Bridger asked finally, knowing Takashi would understand he meant Voss. Takashi considered the question, his weathered hands checking the action on one of the massive rifles. I think she's been holding back, he said. Question is why and how much? Bridger nodded slowly, his mind working through possibilities. Command sent her here for a reason, he said. Her file is mostly redacted, which tells me something by itself. But she's been content to blend into the middle of the pack until now. Until the Barrett, Takashi observed. Until the Barrett, Bridger agreed. He looked out at the range, where targets were being positioned at various distances. The longest was marked at 3,500 meters, a distance that represented the edge of what was considered possible for military snipers. The current record is 3,448 meters, he said. Canadian Special Forces back in 2017. Nobody's beaten it since. Takashi grunted acknowledgement. Most qualified shooters are happy to hit consistently at 1,800, he said. Anything beyond 2,000 requires not just skill, but understanding of physics most people never develop. The conversation hung there, unfinished, but weighted with meaning. Both men had seen enough combat, trained enough soldiers, to know when something didn't add up. Voss was an equation that refused to balance, and Monday would either resolve the contradiction or deepen the mystery. By Sunday evening, the tension in the facility had reached a fever pitch. Holbrook conducted a final review session that drew nearly 30 spectators, trainees who weren't even attempting the qualification but wanted to witness what promised to be a memorable demonstration of expertise. He spoke about wind reading and elevation adjustments, about the specific challenges of the Barrett's recoil management, and the importance of proper body positioning. His audience absorbed it all with rapt attention. In her quarters, Voss sat at her desk with her notebook open, but she wasn't reviewing calculations or studying ballistics tables. Instead, she was looking at a photograph she kept folded in the back of the notebook, its edges worn from handling. The image showed a younger version of herself, standing in desert terrain that looked nothing like the training facility. She wore different insignia, held a rifle that bore no standard military markings, and her eyes carried something that wasn't present in her current incarnation. The eyes of someone who had already done what others considered impossible. She studied the photograph for a long moment, then carefully refolded it and returned it to its hiding place. Tomorrow would bring revelation or continued concealment, and she had already made her choice about which it would be. She closed the notebook, turned off her light, and lay down to sleep with the calm of someone who had nothing left to prove to themselves, only to others. Outside her window, the desert night stretched vast and clear, the kind of conditions that made extraordinary things possible for those who knew how to use them. Monday morning arrived with crystalline clarity, the kind of desert dawn that seemed designed specifically for long-range shooting. The air was still cool, the wind minimal, and visibility extended to the horizon in every direction. By 05:30, the range was already active with preparation, range safety officers positioning themselves at intervals while Takashi supervised the final equipment checks. The Barrett rifles lay on their mounts, massive and purposeful, their presence commanding respect from everyone who approached them. The volunteers assembled at 05:45, 10 candidates in total who would attempt qualification on a weapon system that most would never touch in their entire careers. Holbrook arrived first, as expected, his bearing confident and his gear meticulously prepared. Blackwood and Hightower flanked him, their own nervous energy barely contained. The others filtered in, each processing their anxiety in different ways. Voss arrived at 05:50, precisely 10 minutes early per protocol. She wore the same standard uniform as everyone else, carried the same basic gear, and her expression remained as neutral as ever. But something was different. Bridger, who had positioned himself at the observation area specifically to watch this qualification, noticed it immediately. She moved with fractionally more purpose now, her steps slightly more deliberate, as if some internal switch had been thrown. Takashi called them to formation, his voice cutting through the morning air with practiced authority. This qualification has 3 phases, he announced. Phase 1 is familiarization and safety at 800 meters. Phase 2 is precision shooting at 1,800 meters. Phase 3 is extended range at 2,500 meters. You must pass each phase to advance. Failure at any phase means disqualification. He paused, letting the weight of the standards sink in. The Barrett M82 A1 fires a .50 caliber round with a muzzle velocity of 2,800 feet per second, He continued. At extended ranges, you will need to account for wind drift, elevation drop, Coriolis effect, and atmospheric conditions. This is not point and shoot. This is physics and precision. The candidates were assigned to their weapons in order of seniority. Holbrook received Station 1, the prime position. Voss was assigned Station 7, near the end of the line. As each shooter approached their weapon, the difference in experience became immediately apparent. Some handled the Barrett with obvious unfamiliarity, their movements tentative. Others, like Holbrook, demonstrated clear training and confidence. Voss reached her weapon and paused for a moment, looking down at the massive rifle with an expression that might have been recognition. Then she moved, and everything changed. Her hands touched the Barrett with absolute familiarity, checking the barrel, the action, the scope mounting with movements so fluid they appeared choreographed. She examined the weapon with the kind of efficiency that only came from thousands of hours of experience, her fingers finding each inspection point without conscious thought. She adjusted the bipod legs with precise movements, checked the scope clarity and elevation settings, and performed a functions check with such smooth proficiency that it drew Takashi's immediate attention. Bridger straightened in his observation position, his eyes locked on Voss. "That's not familiarization," he said quietly to Kensington, who stood beside him. "That's muscle memory." Kensington watched, his own surprise evident. "She handles it like she's been shooting Barretts for years," he agreed. On the line, Holbrook had noticed it too. His preparation slowed as he glanced sideways at Voss, watching her work through the weapon check with what appeared to be casual expertise. His confidence flickered, just for a moment, before reasserting itself. "Probably just showing off," he muttered to Blackwood, who stood at the next station. "Knowing how to check a weapon isn't the same as shooting it." Takashi called the line to attention. "Phase 1 begins now," he announced. 800 meters, 3 shots. Must group within 8 inches to advance. Wind is currently 3 knots from the northwest. Temperature is 68 degrees. Humidity is 12%. Station 1. You may commence when ready. Holbrook settled into position, his body finding the proper alignment behind the massive rifle. He took his time, controlling his breathing, calculating his adjustments. The Barrett's report when it fired was thunderous, a percussive blast that rolled across the range like physical force. His first shot landed 3 inches left of center. He adjusted, fired again. 2 inches right. A third shot brought his group to 6 inches total spread. Acceptable. He cleared his weapon and stepped back, satisfaction evident on his face. Stations 2 through 6 proceeded similarly, each shooter struggling with the Barrett's massive recoil and the precision required at 800 meters. 2 candidates failed to group within the required tolerance and were disqualified immediately, their disappointment palpable as they cleared their weapons and stepped away from the line. Station 7, Takashi called. "You may commence when ready." Voss settled behind the Barrett with movements that suddenly looked nothing like a struggling recruit. Her body positioned itself with perfect efficiency. Her cheek found the stock with practiced certainty, and her breathing fell into a rhythm that spoke of deep training. She didn't rush, didn't hesitate. She simply became still, her entire being focused through the scope at a target 800 meters distant. The Barrett's report seemed different when Voss fired it, as if the weapon itself recognized an expert handler. The massive rifle barely moved despite the tremendous recoil, absorbed by body positioning so perfect it appeared effortless. Through his binoculars, Takashi watched the target downrange and saw the hit marker flash. Dead center. He marked it on his tablet without expression, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Voss worked the bolt with smooth efficiency, chambered her second round, and settled back into position. Her breathing cycle was textbook perfect, the kind of control that couldn't be faked or learned in a weekend of study. The second shot followed within 30 seconds. Dead center again, less than an inch from the first impact. The third shot came with the same measure precision. When the group was measured, all 3 rounds clustered within 2 inches of each other, the tightest grouping of any shooter so far. Holbrook stood frozen at his station, his earlier confidence cracking as he watched Voss clear her weapon and step back from the line with the same unremarkable composure she always showed. "That was luck," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Wind conditions were better for Station 7. Blackwood didn't respond, her own mind working through what she had just witnessed. Hightower simply stared, recalculating everything he thought he knew about Corporal Kira Voss. Bridger leaned forward in the observation area, his entire attention now focused on the woman who had just demonstrated precision that exceeded most qualified snipers. "Kensington," he said quietly, "pull her complete service record. Not the sanitized version. Everything you can access." "Sir, most of it is redacted," Kensington replied. "Then find out why," Bridger ordered. "And find out who authorized those redactions." Phase 2 began after a brief safety check and target reset. 1,800 meters now, Takashi announced. "Wind has picked up to 5 knots, variable direction. Temperature rising. You will each fire 5 rounds. Must impact within the acceptable zone to advance. Station 1, commence when ready." Holbrook approached his weapon with renewed determination, but something had shifted. His confidence now carried an edge of desperation, as if he suddenly understood that his position as the obvious frontrunner was no longer secure. He took longer to settle, double-checking his calculations, adjusting and readjusting his position. His first shot at 1,800 meters landed 6 inches low. The second went wide right. He corrected, found his rhythm, and placed his final 3 shots in acceptable positions. 4 of 5 within the zone. Qualified. But his grouping was wider than it should have been, the result of rushed adjustments and rattled concentration. Takashi marked it without comment, but both men knew the performance was below Holbrook's capability. Stations 2 through 6 continued with mixed results. Blackwood qualified with solid performance, her natural steadiness serving her well. Hightower struggled at the extended range and failed to place enough rounds in the zone, his disappointment evident as he stepped away from the line. 2 others qualified. 1 more failed. Station 7, Takashi called, and the entire range seemed to hold its breath. Voss approached the Barrett as if reuniting with an old friend. She settled into position with that same fluid efficiency, but now everyone was watching her differently. The casual dismissal was gone, replaced by focused attention. She didn't seem to notice or care. Her world had narrowed to the scope, the target, and the calculations that occurred so quickly they appeared instinctive. The first shot at 1,800 meters was perfect. Center mass, compensating for wind and elevation with precision that suggested she had already calculated the exact adjustments needed. The second shot matched it. The third, fourth, and fifth followed in steady rhythm, each round finding the target with mechanical consistency. When the grouping was measured, all 5 rounds clustered within 4 inches of each other at 1,800 meters, a performance that would have been exceptional at half that distance. The silence that followed was profound. Even Takashi, who had suspected something was hidden beneath Voss's unremarkable exterior, found himself reassessing what he was witnessing. This wasn't talent. This wasn't even exceptional skill. This was mastery, the kind that required years of constant practice and real-world application. Bridger descended from the observation area, his long strides eating up the distance to where Takashi stood reviewing the scores. "That's not beginner's luck," he said without preamble. "That's not even advanced training. Where the hell did she learn to shoot like that?" Takashi shook his head slowly. "Her file says she came through standard infantry pipeline," he replied. "Completed basic at Fort Jackson, advanced individual training at Fort Benning. Nothing about sniper school, nothing about specialized marksmanship training. Then the file is incomplete," Bridger stated flatly. "Nobody shoots like that without extensive specialized training." On the firing line, Holbrook had gathered Blackwood and several others around him, their voices low but urgent. "She's sandbagging," he said. "Had to be. Nobody goes from mediocre at 25 yards to perfect at 1,800 meters. Unless she wasn't actually mediocre at 25 yards," Reyes said quietly, speaking up for the first time. Maybe she was just shooting exactly as well as she needed to. The group turned to look at him, but before anyone could respond, Takashi's voice cut across the range. Phase 3 begins in 15 minutes, he announced. 2,500 meters. This is the final phase. Those who remain, prepare your equipment and review your calculations. Voss stood at her station, her hands resting lightly on the Barrett. She didn't review calculations or check wind indicators or consult range cards. She simply stood there, waiting with the patience of someone who already knew exactly what she was going to do, and the morning sun climbed higher over the desert as the final phase approached. The 15-minute break felt like hours. Word had spread beyond the immediate range area, and personnel who had no direct involvement with the qualification were finding reasons to be nearby, drawn by rumors of an unexpected performance that was rewriting assumptions. Strand, the range officer who normally maintained professional detachment, found herself watching Voss with open curiosity. Even the support staff seemed to move with heightened attention, sensing that something significant was unfolding. Holbrook stood apart from his usual circle, his mind clearly working through scenarios that didn't match his expectations. He had built his reputation on being the best, on consistently outperforming his peers, and watching someone he had dismissed as barely adequate now demonstrate expertise that exceeded his own was creating cognitive dissonance he couldn't easily resolve. Blackwood approached him cautiously. Maybe she had prior training we don't know about, she suggested. Then why hide it? Holbrook responded, his frustration evident. Why struggle through basic courses if she can shoot like this? It doesn't make sense. Unless she had a reason to hide it, Reyes said, joining them uninvited. His tone was thoughtful rather than confrontational. Maybe she wasn't supposed to stand out. The implications of that statement hung in the air, uncomfortable and provocative. Before anyone could respond, Takashi's voice called them back to positions. The final phase of qualification would determine who truly belonged among elite marksmen, and the 2,500-meter distance represented a barrier that separated competent shooters from exceptional ones. Bridger had returned to the observation area, but now he was joined by Kensington, who carried a tablet with information that only deepened the mystery. "Sir, I pulled what I could on Voss," Kensington said quietly. "Standard service record shows nothing unusual, but there's a 2-year gap in her file that's completely redacted. No duty stations, no deployment records, nothing. And the authorization level for those redactions is above my clearance." Bridger absorbed this information, his expression hardening. 2 years is a long time to completely disappear from records, he said. That level of classification usually means special operations or intelligence work. "That's what I'm thinking, sir," Kensington agreed. "And if she was doing specialized work during that gap, it would explain the skill set we're seeing. But not why she's here now," Bridger observed, "or why she's been content to appear average until today." On the firing line, Takashi was reviewing the Phase 3 requirements with the 5 remaining candidates. 2,500 meters represents the edge of reliable engagement range for this weapon system, he explained. Wind will have significant effect. Bullet drop will exceed 40 feet from bore line. You will need to account for spin drift, Coriolis effect, and atmosphere pressure changes. 3 shots, 2 must impact the target zone. This is not about grouping anymore. This is about hitting it all. The candidates absorbed this with varying degrees of confidence. 2,500 meters was beyond what most of them had ever attempted with any weapon system. It required not just skill, but understanding of physics that went beyond standard training. Holbrook settled behind his Barrett with renewed focus. Whatever doubts had crept into his mind, he pushed them aside and concentrated on the fundamentals that had brought him this far. He took his time calculating, checking, and rechecking his numbers. His first shot at 2,500 meters went long by 8 feet, overshooting the elevation calculation. He adjusted, compensated perhaps too much, and his second shot landed 4 feet short. The third found the zone, barely, catching the edge of the acceptable area. 1 of 3. Disqualified. His face went pale as the realization hit. He had failed the qualification he had been certain he would dominate. Around him, he could feel the weight of expectations crumbling. The reputation he had built now tarnished by public failure at a distance that had proven beyond his current capability. Blackwood stepped to the line next, her nerves evident in the slight tremor of her hands. She fought through it, applying her training with determination. Her first shot missed entirely, sailing over the target. Her second caught the zone. Her third missed by inches. One of three. Disqualified. She stepped back, her disappointment visible but controlled. Two more candidates attempted the distance. One managed 2 hits and qualified. Another failed completely. Then it was Station 7's turn, and every eye on the range was fixed on Corporal Kira Voss. She approached the Barrett with the same fluid confidence she had shown all morning, but now there was something else. A subtle shift in her bearing, as if each successful phase had peeled away another layer of concealment. She settled into position behind the massive rifle, and her body language transformed completely. This was no longer a recruit pretending to be adequate. This was a master craftsman preparing to demonstrate her art. She didn't rush her calculations, but neither did she labor over them. Her adjustments came quickly, precisely, the result of internalized understanding rather than conscious computation. The wind had picked up to 7 knots, variable and gusting, the kind of conditions that made long-range shooting as much art as science. She read the mirage, assessed the flags downrange, and made final adjustments to her scope with movements so economical they appeared effortless. Her first shot broke the morning stillness with that familiar, thunderous report. Through his spotting scope, Takashi tracked the round's flight, watching the vapor trail arc across the impossible distance. 2 seconds passed. Then impact dead center in the target zone. Perfect hit at 2,500 meters. The second shot followed 30 seconds later, another perfect impact that landed within inches of the first. The murmurs from the assembled observers grew louder, disbelief mixing with dawning recognition that they were witnessing something extraordinary. Voss chambered her third round with mechanical precision, settled back into position, and fired again. 3 for 3 at 2,500 meters, each round placed with surgical accuracy that exceeded anything the others had achieved. She cleared her weapon and stood, her expression still neutral, but something had changed in her eyes. The careful concealment was gone, replaced by quiet certainty that needed no validation from anyone watching. She had just demonstrated mastery that placed her among the top tier of military marksmen, and everyone present knew it. Takashi approached her station, his weathered face unreadable. He examined her target data on his tablet, then looked at her with new assessment. "Corporal Voss," he said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent range. "You've qualified at 2,500 meters with perfect scores. That performance places you in the top 5% of Barrett operators in the entire military." "Thank you, Master Chief," she replied simply. "But that's not the end of this, is it?" Takashi continued, his tone shifting. "Because I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've never seen someone shoot like you just shot without extensive specialized training. So I'm going to ask you directly, where did you learn to handle a Barrett like that?" Voss met his gaze steadily. The question hung in the desert air, weighted with implications that reached far beyond simple curiosity. Before she could answer, Bridger's voice cut across the range as he strode toward them with purpose. "Belay that question, Master Chief," he ordered. His eyes locked on Voss with intensity that demanded truth. "Corporal Voss, your service record has significant gaps that are above standard classification levels. You've just demonstrated proficiency that requires years of specialized training you supposedly never received. I'm ordering you to explain where you acquired these skills." The silence that followed was absolute. Everyone on the range understood they were witnessing something unprecedented, though most didn't yet grasp the full implications. Voss stood at attention. Her decision point finally arrived. She could continue the concealment, provide vague answers, maintain the carefully constructed image of barely adequate competence, or she could acknowledge what everyone had just witnessed and accept the consequences. Sir, she began, her voice quiet but carrying clearly. I need to request a private conversation. Some of what I can tell you is classified above this setting's authorization level. Bridger's expression hardened. You can start with what isn't classified, he said. How long have you been shooting at this level? Voss glanced at the assembled observers, then back to Bridger. 8 years, sir, she said, give or take. The admission sent ripples through the crowd. 8 years of experience at this level meant she had been one of the military's elite marksmen, while most of the trainees watching had still been in high school. Holbrook's face had gone from pale to flushed, the mathematics of his humiliation now complete. And the 2-year gap in your service record? Bridger pressed. Classified operations, sir, Voss replied. I can't discuss details without proper authorization, but I can confirm I was assigned to a joint task force conducting precision targeting in denied areas. Bridger processed this, his mind connecting pieces that should have been obvious from the start. The redactions, the skill level, the careful concealment. You were a sniper for a Black Ops unit, he said. It wasn't quite a question. I was a precision marksman assigned to operations that required extended range capabilities. Sir, Voss confirmed, choosing her words carefully. My longest confirmed engagement was conducted at ranges beyond standard military records. How far beyond? Takashi asked, unable to contain his curiosity. Voss hesitated, then made her decision. 5,000 meters, Master Chief, she said. Confirmed kill at 5,000 meters under combat conditions. The statement landed like a physical blow. 5,000 meters was nearly twice the distance they had just been shooting. It was beyond what most people considered possible, beyond what physics seemed to allow, beyond the recorded achievements of any known military marksman. It was legendary. That's impossible, Holbrook said, his voice breaking the stunned silence. The longest confirmed kill is 3,400 meters. That's been the record for years. You can't just claim 5,000 meters. Voss turned to look at him, and for the first time since arriving at the facility, her expression showed something other than careful neutrality. It showed the quiet confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove because she had already proven everything that mattered. I'm not claiming it, Sergeant, she said. I'm stating it. And it's not in any public record because the operation was classified at the highest levels. But it happened, and I made that shot, and that's why I'm here. Why are you here? Bridger demanded. If you have that level of experience, that level of clearance, why are you going through basic qualification courses pretending to be average? Voss's jaw tightened slightly. Because I was burned, sir, she said. My identity was compromised during an operation that went bad. 2 years of deep cover work became useless overnight. The task force was disbanded, and I was reassigned through normal channels to protect operational security. My orders were to maintain low profile until threat assessment could determine if I was still at risk. And now? Bridger asked. Now I've been cleared to resume normal operations, sir, she replied. But I was instructed to avoid drawing attention until officially reintegrated. She glanced around at the assembled observers, the shocked faces, the tablets undoubtedly recording every word. That instruction just became impossible to follow. Bridger studied her for a long moment, his mind rapidly recalibrating everything he thought he knew about the quiet corporal who had struggled through obstacle courses and sat alone in the mess hall. The pieces were falling into place now, creating a picture that made sense of the contradictions. A burned operative with years of specialized experience, forced to blend in and appear unremarkable while threat assessments were conducted. It explained the physical struggles, the careful mediocrity, the sudden transformation when faced with her actual area of expertise. I want a full debrief, he said, in my office in 1 hour. Bring whatever documentation you're authorized to share. Master Chief, continue with standard qualification protocols for the remaining candidates. He turned to address the assembled observers, his command voice brooking no argument. Everything you've witnessed here this morning is now classified. You will not discuss Corporal Voss's performance or statements with anyone outside this range without my direct authorization. That's an order. Dismissed. The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly, people processing what they had witnessed with varying degrees of comprehension. Holbrook stood frozen at his station, his entire worldview having been dismantled in the span of 2 hours. The woman he had mocked, dismissed, and condescended to had just revealed herself as one of the most skilled marksmen in military history. The humiliation was complete and public, and there was no walking it back. Reyes approached him carefully. "Sarge," he said quietly, "you couldn't have known." Holbrook shook his head slowly. "I should have," he replied, his voice hollow. All the signs were there. The way she moved, the way she stayed calm under pressure, the way she checked that Barrett like she'd done 1,000 times before. I was so busy being convinced of my own assessment that I missed what was right in front of me. Blackwood joined them, her own expression troubled. "We all missed it," she said. "We saw what we expected to see." "That's not an excuse," Holbrook said. He looked across the range to where Voss was securing her weapon, her movements efficient and professional. In combat, missing signs like that gets people killed. She was right there, watching us underestimate her, and she led us because those were her orders. But I made it personal. I made it about her not belonging. Before anyone could respond, Voss approached them. She moved with the same purposeful stride she had shown all morning, no longer concealing the confidence that came from proven competence. She stopped in front of Holbrook, came to attention, and waited. Holbrook met her gaze, saw no anger there, no triumph, just professional assessment. "Corporal, I owe you an apology," he said formally. "My behavior toward you has been unprofessional and based on assumptions that were completely wrong. I let bias override observation, and that's inexcusable." Voss nodded slightly. "Apology accepted, Sergeant," she replied. "For what it's worth, you're a solid shooter. Your performance at 1,800 meters was good work. You just need more practice at extended ranges." The generosity of the statement, coming from someone he had spent weeks dismissing, hit harder than any rebuke could have. "You really made that shot?" he asked quietly. 5,000 meters? Voss's expression shifted, memory flickering across her features. "Helmand Province," she said. 3 years ago. Target was a high-value individual coordinating attacks on coalition forces. Intel placed him in a compound that was too fortified for direct assault. Command needed him eliminated without collateral damage. I was positioned on a ridgeline 5,700 feet away, which translates to just over 5,000 meters. She paused, and her voice took on the distant quality of someone reliving a critical moment. Wind was variable, gusting to 15 knots. Temperature was over 100 degrees. I had to account for air density, humidity, the curvature of the Earth at that distance. I calculated for 47 seconds of flight time. When I took the shot, I knew it was good. But I still had to wait almost a minute to see the impact. The small group around her was silent, imagining what that minute must have felt like. Takashi had drifted closer, listening with the attention of someone who understood exactly what she was describing. "Did you miss?" Blackwood asked. Voss shook her head. "Center mass," she said simply. "One shot, one kill at 5,000 meters. The operation was successful, the target was eliminated, and I extracted without compromise. It was the longest confirmed kill in special operations history, and it's still classified because revealing it would compromise other operations in that theater. Jesus, igotovir briated. And you've been here, struggling through basic courses like none of that ever happened." "Those were my orders," Voss replied. "Maintain low profile, don't draw attention, blend in with standard training cycles. I followed those orders until today." She glanced at Bridger, who was still on the range, coordinating with Strand. "I knew volunteering for Barrett qualification would expose me, but staying hidden wasn't working anymore. Better to control the revelation than have it happen by accident." Takashi nodded approval. "Smart call," he said. "And for the record, that demonstration this morning was the finest shooting I've seen in 30 years. You've earned respect today, Corporal, from everyone here." Voss accepted this with quiet dignity, then turned back to Holbrook. "I know you're processing a lot right now, Sergeant," she said, "but I want you to know that your leadership skills are solid. You built a strong team here. You just need to be more careful about your assumptions. In the field, underestimating people can be as dangerous as overestimating them. Holbrook nodded slowly, absorbing the lesson being offered by someone who had every right to be less gracious. I won't make that mistake again, he said. Good, Voss replied, because when we deploy together, and we probably will eventually, I need you at your best. We all do. The statement carried implicit forgiveness and an invitation to move forward, and Holbrook felt the weight of his humiliation shift slightly. Not gone, but manageable. A lesson learned rather than a career-ending mistake. He extended his hand, and after a moment, Voss shook it with a grip that was stronger than her frame suggested. The debrief in Bridger's office lasted 3 hours, during which Voss provided what details she was authorized to share about her previous assignments. The documentation she produced, heavily redacted but bearing authorization codes that checked out through secure channels, confirmed her story. She had indeed been part of a joint special operations task force conducting precision strikes in denied areas. Her record included 17 confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 3,000 meters, with the Helmand province shot representing the apex of her documented capabilities. When she finally emerged from the command building, the facility had transformed around her. Word had spread despite Bridger's classification order, as word always does in military environments. People watch her differently now, moving aside with unconscious respect, conversations pausing as she passed. The isolation she had experienced for weeks had been replaced by its opposite, an attention that carried weight and expectation. Takashi found her near the armory that evening, where she was conducting routine maintenance on the Barrett she had used that morning. He watched her work for a moment, noting the practiced efficiency that no longer needed concealment. Captain wants you to know you've been reassigned, he said without preamble. You're no longer in the standard training cycle. Effective immediately, you're appointed as Senior Marksmanship Instructor for Advanced Weapon Systems. Voss looked up from her work, surprise flickering across her features. Sir, I'm still technically a corporal, she said. Takashi smiled slightly. Captain's putting through paperwork for promotion to sergeant, he said, and he's requesting you be permanently assigned to this facility to develop and implement extended-range training protocols. Apparently, your skill set is too valuable to waste on standard deployments. She absorbed this information, processing the implications. It meant staying stateside, teaching rather than operating, passing on knowledge rather than applying it directly. For someone who had spent years in the field, it represented a significant shift. But it also meant safety, stability, and the opportunity to shape the next generation of precision marksmen. I accept, she said simply. Good, Takashi replied, because your first student is waiting outside. He specifically requested remedial training in long-range shooting. Said he needed to learn from someone who actually knows what they're doing. Voss followed Takashi outside to find Holbrook standing at parade rest, his expression serious but no longer carrying the weight of defensive pride. When he saw her, he came to attention. Corporal Voss, he said formally. Sergeant Holbrook requesting permission to train under your instruction. She studied him for a moment, seeing genuine humility and determination to improve. Permission granted, Sergeant, she replied. But I should warn you, I'm a demanding instructor. You'll work harder than you've ever worked before. I wouldn't expect anything less, ma'am, Holbrook said. The training began the next morning with a small group that included Holbrook, Blackwood, and Reyes, along with 3 other qualified shooters who had heard about Voss's demonstration and requested placement in her program. She ran them through fundamentals with exacting precision, breaking down every aspect of long-range shooting into components that could be taught, practiced, and mastered. Her teaching style was patient but uncompromising, accepting nothing less than complete understanding of the principles underlying each technique. Holbrook proved to be an attentive student, his earlier confidence now tempered by recognition of how much he still had to learn. Under Voss's instruction, his groupings tightened, his calculations became more accurate, and his understanding of atmospheric effects deepened beyond what standard training provided. By the end of the first week, he had successfully engaged targets at 3,000 meters, a distance he hadn't thought himself capable of reaching. Blackwood excelled at the technical aspects, her methodical nature finding satisfaction in the mathematical precision required for extreme-range shooting. Reyes discovered a natural talent for wind reading that surprised everyone, including himself. The group coalesced into a cohesive unit under Voss's leadership, mutual respect replacing the earlier dynamics of mockery and dismissal. 2 months after the qualification that had revealed her true capabilities, Voss stood on the observation platform, watching her students conduct live-fire exercises at extended ranges. Bridger joined her, observing the training with professional satisfaction. "You've built something valuable here," he said. "These shooters are operating at levels we've never achieved in standard training before." "They're good students, sir," Voss replied. "They just needed someone to show them what's possible." Bridger nodded, then added, "I received word from command yesterday. Your classification status has been updated. You're officially cleared for normal operations without restriction. If you want to return to field assignments, the option is available." Voss watched Holbrook make a successful hit at 3,500 meters, his celebration restrained but genuine. "Thank you, sir," she said, "but I think I'm exactly where I need to be. These operators will deploy eventually, and when they do, they'll carry forward what I've taught them. That multiplies my effectiveness more than any individual operation could." "Smart thinking," Bridger agreed. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. This facility needed someone like you, even if we didn't know it at first." As the sun began its descent toward the desert horizon, painting the range in golden light, Voss felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Not just satisfaction, but belonging. The careful concealment was gone, the isolation ended, and in their place was purpose renewed through teaching rather than doing. If you enjoyed the story, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part, character, or if you've had a similar situation happen to you before. Maybe you've witnessed someone reveal hidden talents that changed how everyone saw them. Or perhaps you've served with operators who taught you more than you thought possible. The evening formation assembled, as always, but now, when Voss took her position, it was at the front alongside the other senior instructors. Holbrook, standing in formation with the others, caught her eye and nodded once with quiet respect. She returned the gesture, then faced forward as Bridger began the evening brief. Somewhere in the desert darkness beyond the facility lights, targets waited at impossible distances. Tomorrow, she would teach her students how to reach them, how to make shots that others considered beyond capability, how to transform physics and mathematics into precision that saved lives and completed missions. It was different work than she had done before, but no less important. She had been the invisible operator, the burned asset forced into hiding, the underestimated recruit who struggled through basic courses. Now, she was Sergeant Kira Voss, master instructor, the woman who had made the impossible shot and lived to teach others how to follow in her footsteps. The transformation was complete, and the legend had just begun.